Welcome to the Bowhunter Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Now, here's your host, editor Christian Berg.
All right, welcome back to the Bowhunter Podcast. We are all bow hunting all the time, and today we've got a really cool episode because we're going to talk about a couple of things that we just probably don't talk about enough. And one of them is the state of Maryland, which in my opinion is probably an underrated kind of sleeper state when it comes to bow hunting. And another one is state bow hunter associations, because there's state bow hunter associations all around the country doing great things for our sport. And I had just kind of an out of the blue email a few weeks back from somebody from the Maryland Bowhunters Society and said, hey, we just elected a new president recently, and it's a woman, and we think it's kind of unusual. In fact, we're not sure if there's ever been a woman in charge of any state bowhunter association. And I don't know exactly where you'd go to figure out if that's true, but I will say it was the first time I had ever heard of it. So with that, I want to introduce this episode's guest. I've got Maribeth, and let's see if I can get her last name right without butchering it. Maribeth Kulynycz. Is that right, Maribeth?
You got it right on the first try. That's pretty commendable, actually. Good job.
All right. So Maribeth Kulynycz, you are the president of the Maryland Bowhunters Society, and congratulations to you. I assume this is a relatively recent development. Is that true?
Yes. Oh, thank you very much. It was a hard fought battle. I actually ran unopposed. So, this has been in the works for a while to get me up into this position. And I'm so privileged and honored to be able to do it. And yes, it is recent. We just had our annual banquet and our elections in March. So I'm really just getting in my groove and, hitting the ground running.
Well, that is awesome. And I look forward to learning more about your background in bow hunting and what the MBS is doing. I kind of want to start out circling back. Let's hype Maryland a little bit for a minute, because, people consume this podcast all around the country and even around the world to a certain extent, Maribeth. And I don't think, honestly, unless you happen to be, I'm in Pennsylvania, so I'm right next door. Unless you're from the mid-Atlantic region, chances are, when you think about all the places that you can go to travel for a bow hunting adventure, Maryland probably is not near the top of the list for most out-of-state people. And I don't think people realize because Maryland's not a huge state either, but the diversity of what you guys have is pretty incredible. From Western Maryland, where you butt up against West Virginia, you're in the Appalachian Mountains there. You have some really rugged terrain. You've got black bear hunting and classic like hardwood ridges for deer hunting and turkey hunting. And then as you transition to the center of the state, you've got a lot of really nice farm country. And as you get to the eastern portion of the state, you've got all this coastline and marshland, incredible waterfowling, which isn't a bow hunting thing, but that's probably what Maryland is best known for if you just think hunting in general. But and you can't see it, but right where I'm pointing above my computer here, I've got my Sika deer stag on the wall, because I had an opportunity to shoot a really nice 6-point Sika 2 Decembers ago. And so the Sika deer, and I wrote a whole story about that, about these little Japanese deer that were brought over, like 100 and some years ago. You've got anyway, I'm going on, but you know more than I do, but I'm not lying, right? You guys have a lot.
We really do. And it's funny because the hunter in me, as you start talking about it, like makes my palms sweat a little bit. I'm like, don't tell everyone, like this is our secret over here. But the hunting advocate in me that wants to see as many people in the woods as possible is like, let's celebrate all that we have, because this is, everybody says it, but it's God's country, like this, it's a haven for so many animals. And I'm over on the Eastern Shore, and I tell you, the deer, and like you said, the Sika deer, I think Maryland was a little more of a well-kept secret until Sika deer became a thing. And they're so ingrained in our history of hunting. And it's really cool that, an invasive species can come in and really bring in so many different things to a state like they've done. Because a lot of times they're just looked at as a nuisance, and to some they probably still are. But for us, we've really capitalized on that and have been able to, now we have something so unique. It's the only huntable population of this type of Sika deer in the world, and a wild population. So, but when I travel, like especially down to Texas, and you say Maryland, everybody's like, what? What are you talking about? Like it's just not even on the radar of states. And, but we really do have an amazing, like Southern Maryland is really known for some really beautiful deer and some huge deer. And then, like you said, you've got the waterfowl aspect of it. And my grandfather, who grew up in a small island community here, which that's what a lot of our way of life on the Eastern Shore is all surrounded by the water. You have these tiny little island communities of watermen and women that have made their lives. So, and that's where my grandfather grew up. And so waterfowl hunting was such a part of his life. And it's really special to be able to live in a place like this. And yeah, we're really lucky to be able to do it.
Yeah, the Eastern Shore. And again, for folks who aren't super familiar, like if you're out in Iowa or Missouri or Texas or whatever, just pull your phone out, call up Google Maps and like zoom in on the geography. There's this whole piece of Maryland that's sort of wedged in between the Chesapeake Bay and the state of Delaware. And it goes down, across the bay, essentially from Baltimore and the part of Maryland that most of you probably think of. And it's a rural, largely farming type area. And then, as Maribeth said, the water, and that she used that term, the watermen. That's like, again, if you're not like from there, it doesn't make sense. This is just really a culture that has existed for centuries on the Eastern Shore. And what's a waterman? It's basically just somebody who makes their living from the bay. So it's not like they just do one thing. It could be seasonal throughout the year. Maybe they fish part of the year. Maybe they guide waterfowlers for part of the year. Maybe they work on boats, or but essentially, that entire area there is just so dominated culturally by the bay and the wildlife and the natural resources there, Maribeth, and it really is neat. And as you said, and I can see behind you, you've got a bunch of mounts on the wall. It is an area that's known for producing lots of really big whitetails. And I do mean big, I don't mean big just for this part of the world, but big, 160, 70, 80, even some 200-inch deer come out of that Eastern Shore of Maryland. So, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background in archery and bow hunting? And I'm sure those whitetails are a big part of it.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. I was born into a family that loves hunting. Now, my dad actually was the son of 2 Ukrainian immigrants. So they didn't hunt, but they knew how to survive. They were farmers. They lived off the land. And when my dad was really little, he took such an interest in hunting. He had an older brother, and he wanted to follow in his footsteps. And so he started hunting when he was, 5, 6, 7 years old, out there hunting with his brother. And then as he started having kids, he actually got so involved in the outdoors, he decided to become a natural resource police officer. And hunting just became even more of a part of his life. And then, so he started having us kids, right? He had 3 girls. And then, I always joke that I was the one I'm the middle girl, and there's a lot that can be said about that. But I'm like, I was the one that he had, just in case he didn't get a son. He wanted to have at least one girl that would hunt with him. And he introduced all of us to it, but I really took to it. I just fell in love with it, followed him everywhere from as early as I could walk. And he did have a boy. My brother is, he's the baby of the family. So we finally got the boy, which is great because that is my hunting partner. So I started hunting when I was 9 is when I took my first deer. And absolutely was just hooked. You're right from the start. Got a little 4-pointer. He's still on my wall to this day. Just beautiful deer. Still love him. And then, as time went on and I started getting more deer, and I was very successful, early on. And that can be a blessing and a curse, because you kind of just feel like you've set this bar a little high, and then it's like, where do you go from there? Well, for me, then it was like, I want to start bow hunting. I want to increase my challenge. But I'm such an animal lover, always have been. I was, definitely the kid bringing home everything like that I could find in my shirt, bringing kittens and raccoons, everything. And so my dad really didn't think that I had the heart for bow hunting, and he pushed me off for a while. And I think I was 20 or 21 when I actually got my first bow. It was a compound bow. I finally, he had to give in eventually. So I went ahead and I got the bow, and I struggled pretty bad with the compound. Everybody's like, oh, I just went to it and it was beautiful. And no, it wasn't. I had terrible target panic with the compound. And so I decided to go ahead and a couple years in, I started shooting traditional archery. And that really just changed my whole bow hunting journey. And I was successful early on. And again, you set that bar too high, so now it's and when you have those tough seasons, it's like, oh man. But, I just fell in love with this traditional way of life. And I think, being from Maryland, that is kind of rich in history and culture, even going back to the Native Americans, like something about this traditional way of life just really spoke to me. And then, I don't think I ever thought too much, even though having a dad who was natural resource police, I don't think I thought all that much about like the legal and the political aspect of hunting. Well, when I got older, I ended up meeting a gentleman named Lou Compton, who was the president of the Bowhunters Society. And actually, I met him the day I got my first Sika stag, which was an amazing adventure. That deer was actually bedded in the snow, and I made a stalk on him and took a 40-yard shot with my compound on a bedded stag in the snow. So it doesn't get any better than that. I don't know why I do that. I set the bar too high, and it's tough when you do that. But I met that gentleman, and he was the president of the Bowhunters Society, and he wanted me in right away. After 5 minutes of talking, he's like, I want you in. I want you as an officer. And that's where my journey in the Maryland Bowhunters Society began. And I really started realizing how important it is to fight for our hunting rights. And it just has kind of snowballed from there, really.
Yeah. So how long ago was that? How long have you been involved with the Bowhunter Society?
It's been, it was 10 years, and I came in, they pretty much put me in as the executive secretary, like right away, day one. They're like, you're in, you're an officer. So again, I think they've been grooming me for this to become the president right from the beginning. And I've been on the board with some amazing guys, Dennis Bradford, who his family is so rich in the Maryland history and culture of bow hunting, and Lou Compton, Lee Bostick, Cheryl Neese. I have worked with these guys, and they've really groomed me for this position. They have filled me with so much information, and this organization it's such a well-run, meaningful organization. And I feel very lucky. I can't take any credit for that, because this all started happening way before I was born. 1977 is when the Maryland Bowhunters Society was actually formed. So, I just have come in at a good time, and with kind of able to bridge the gap between the generations too, because we're leaving this generation where the state hunting organizations had the shoots, the 3D shoots, and all these gatherings in person. We're kind of getting away from that now, and it's turning more into social media and once a year gatherings. And so now I've come in at a really good time to be able to take Maryland Bowhunters Society into the next phase of our existence.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit, you mentioned how long it's been around. Well, let me ask you a couple questions. First, and you probably know this, how many bow hunters, period are there in Maryland? How many licensed bow hunters, and then how many, members do you guys have? And I'm sure it's only a small fraction, because unfortunately that's the way it is across the country. It'd be great if more of us would get involved with groups like yours that are doing the work. But yeah, how big is bow hunting, relative to all hunting in Maryland? And then where do you guys stand?
So when the Maryland Bowhunters Society first began in 1977, and this is interesting because in kind of preparing myself for this podcast, I really started trying to do some digging on the history, on who the founding fathers were, because I know more of the recent history, but to really go back to that 1977, what was going on politically that really spurred this movement for these guys to want to start this organization. And it's going to take more research to really get to the bottom of it, but I'm excited. And now this has just spurred something else in me to really want to document the exact history of how this all came to be. So that's a whole nother thing. But back in the early days, I think we were around 1,500, like 2,000 members, which was great. But around 2000, things really started going downhill. And our membership dropped down to almost nothing. There was nobody leading the organization. Things went down the tube quick. And Mr. Lou Compton is the one who stood up and was like, we need to figure out what's going on. He did some serious reorganizing and, gave a rebirth to the society, really. And thank heavens for him, because if not, it would have faded out back in those times. So when it comes to how many people have an archery license, actually, I don't have that number, but I do know that 2% of the Maryland population buys a hunting license. That's all weapons. And the first time I heard that was in Annapolis giving testimony, and the opposition said that. And I was like, that's a lie. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And especially on the Eastern Shore, which seems like so many people hunt. But when you really start to think about it, because we have such big cities like Baltimore and the areas around DC and stuff that are we have a lot of people and very few are actually hunting. And I think that, that's one of our big goals right now, is to try to get more hunters in. But then also, like you said, it's hard to even get the ones who are bow hunting involved in an organization. So today our membership is right around 500, which is great. It's built up a lot in the past few years, and I have hopes that we're going to get it up even higher than that.
Yeah. Listen, it's interesting because, to your point, you think about any of these organizations, I would first of all say, don't feel bad at all about where you are, because even the Pope and Young Club only has 5,000 or 6,000 members, and that's national. And you would think everybody knows about Pope and Young. You shoot a big deer and you're like, oh, that's a record book deer. And you think about the Pope and Young Club and the records program, and you realize how few of all the several million bow hunters around the country are actually members at any of these organizations. It's kind of surprising, because you touched on it. We live in a world where we are a bigger and bigger minority all the time as sportsmen. And who is advocating for our views? Sure, any one person can show up at a DNR meeting or a legislative hearing and testify, but that's not all that common, and if you have a group like yours that's keeping track of the issues and providing that advocacy, it's so critical. And I wonder, because I have no idea, I would imagine almost all of our listeners have no idea what are the hot bow hunting oriented, issues in Maryland. Like, what's going on, and what are you guys doing to represent the voice of the bow hunter in Maryland?
Well, Maryland being one of the original 13 colonies, we are stuck under some really old school laws. And one of the main things that we have been fighting in Annapolis for many, many years is Sunday hunting. We don't have statewide Sunday hunting. And we had to fight for this. Every county chooses which Sundays they would like to participate in that. And it's been a big deal, and it's really hard. And we're trying, even still in some counties don't allow it at all. And we're still trying to get, archery only, just little, get a foot in the door any way you can. We also, anytime that there's really anything hunting related, we get alerted about it through an organization called Hunters of Maryland, which they actually have a lobbyist, and one of their founders is a man by the name of Steve Keithley, who actually won the Stewardship Award for Pope and Young this year. Now, this guy has spent decades pouring himself into Maryland and into the legal side of things and making sure that we have a voice. And it's because of people like him. So that's the hard part too. You have very few people that are having to step up and be this voice. And it's hard and it's overwhelming for the average person. Like, how do you even start? And how do you go about something like that? That's why organizations like Hunters of Maryland, like Maryland Bowhunters Society, are so vital, because through this lobbyist that we have, Mr. Bill Miles, who is, the first time I followed him around the halls of Annapolis, it was just fascinating. He knew everybody. He knew what to say. Oh, what about Bill HB 333? Like, I'm doing this and that. He was so educated and so knowledgeable. And I realized how little that I knew. So he keeps us up to date on all hunting related issues. There's always waterfowl issues. A big issue that we have here too is, here we are fighting for every opportunity that legal, license holding hunters can have to hunt. And on the same hand, we have farmers that are going through tremendous amounts of crop damage. And that's a big issue that we've had. They've tried to incorporate nighttime crop damage shooting and basically unlimited crop damage shooting to be done year round. So that's one thing we really have to keep an eye on as the Bowhunter Society, is making sure that we maintain a balance. And it's hard because we got our biggest opposition is also the Horse Council, because a big part of Western Maryland and the other side of the Bay Bridge is horse country. So you have these equestrians that are really dead set against people hunting, and especially public lands and Sundays. They really come against us on that. And that's a tough one for me, because I bridge that gap. One of my jobs is a therapeutic riding instructor. I'm a certified trail guide and instructor and all these things. And I love the equestrian world. So it's also kind of interesting when I go up to Annapolis to testify on these things, that I can see both sides of it. And I can really try to present like a unified front. That's the goal in all of these things and all these organizations, is to try to bring unity. In looking back at, like what the original goals of Maryland Bowhunters Society were, that was one of the big things, is to bring sportsmen together. And we have so much disparity, not only, amongst us and non-hunters, but within the hunting community, there's so much disparity. So if you can get behind an organization like in your state, like we have for Maryland Bowhunters Society, and let them be your voice. That's the important thing. And even because we have a very conservative state, we have to keep an eye on gun laws as well. Anytime that anything, hunting or is related, we will be there to speak for all hunters.
You said conservative. Did you mean you have a very conservative? You meant liberal.
No, I'm sorry, liberal. I didn't mean to say conservative.
That's what I thought. You're like, what? Is it? I'm like, I don't think Maryland is really conservative.
Liberal. No. I was trying to watch my words. And I was like, but yes, it's as so. There's always, even a few years ago, there was a bill that came up that would have made it so that no one under the age of 16 could use a firearm at all. And that would include youth hunters. And we had to, contact all our members and put it out there like, hey, contact your lawmakers and let them know we're not behind this. So that kind of stuff can get killed before it even makes it, to the state. So yeah, that's kind of some of the issues, but every year it's something new. But staying informed and having people who know that is the important thing, because it's very overwhelming when you sit back and look at it.
Oh, absolutely. So we're here with Maribeth Kulynycz, the president of the Maryland Bowhunters Society, and really enjoying the conversation. Before we continue, I just want to take a moment and remind everybody that the Bowhunter Podcast is brought to you by Lancaster Archery Supply. For all your bow hunting needs, visit lancasterarchery.com. They've got the gear, they've got the knowledge, and they've got the passion. And speaking of passion, Maribeth, obviously you guys do a lot of things from an advocacy standpoint, with the DNR, with the state legislature, and all of that is really important. But you mentioned earlier about the need to just get more people involved in bow hunting. Talk to me about some of the things that the Bowhunters Society does along those lines, whether it's shoots, rallies, educational programs, maybe going to an outdoor show and doing something for kids or whatever.
Yeah, we're really passionate about the kids. They are the next generation. These are the ones that we want to see carry this on. This poor little 2% of us out here struggling. We need to get these next ones involved because we're going to lose it if we don't. So Maryland Bowhunters Society, actually, I think it was in 2004, took over the National Archeries in Schools program for Maryland. The program was dying off and just nothing was getting done. And Lou Compton, again, he stepped up and he really made that happen so that we kept supporting that program. And actually last year, DNR finally took that program back over. And now it is again a state-run organization. But what we do is we make sure that every team has the equipment they need. They have the targets they need. They have, that type of stuff. Any school that comes to us, we make sure that we're there to give them whatever donation they need. And one of our goals would be that archery could be offered in every single school in Maryland. And it's really taken off. I mean, even the little tiny private school where I graduated from, they were national champions for like 3 years in a row. So it's been really cool to see people get involved. And this is a way of getting a bow in people's hands that never would have that opportunity. And that is so important. And DNR is constantly looking for ways to do that. They have mentorship programs and things like that really are aimed at getting those non-hunters involved, because you got to think, if you're from a hunting family, you're going to have people to teach you along the way. But if not, those opportunities are hard to come by. And learning about how to do these things, just little things that us hunters take for granted, when you go into the woods, people that have no experience, to them, it's all groundbreaking information. It's all new things. So in thinking of moving forward, now currently we do offer educational shoots. We'll do bow shoots. We will do education, homeschool groups, anything like that. Anyone who reaches out to us and wants information or education, they get it. And but moving forward, again, in this kind of more media and driven world, I really would like to have more educational videos for people, because that's what we need to be able to reach the majority of people, is access to it right there in front of them. Because again, less and less people are wanting to come do things in person. And we've definitely seen a trend of that over the years, of having shoots and going to shows and things like that. The interest in person is waning, but the online presence is growing. So I think that's going to be the future, is educational videos and, ways to inform the people out there that need it the most.
Yeah, that NASP program is fantastic. And, all over the country, that's really grown. And I think the cool thing about NASP, and is that the data shows that so many of those kids who participate in that go on to, purchase their own bows and get involved in recreational archery and target archery and bow hunting. So that's definitely been a really successful program. And, then you mentioned, the digital stuff. And it's funny, I was just talking to Kurt Price earlier today. Kurt Price is him and his brother Eric were the inventors of the Luminoc, and they own Burt Coyote Company that makes the Luminocs. And I was talking to him earlier today, and we got talking about that exact thing, about how, ever since COVID, the whole world changed. And I was like, yeah, I don't even like to leave the house anymore. I don't want to go nowhere. I became a homebody during COVID, and I still hate leaving. And it is strange, and of course the digital media gets more and more. And hey, this is it right here. A podcast is one, who knew 10 years ago that podcasting was going to be such a thing to even influence the election, with Joe Rogan, and the president and all that. So it's crazy to see how the media landscape changes all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the struggles too, is keeping up with those changing times. As an old school organization, you have to keep moving and changing to make it happen, because it's hard to get people interested. I think that is the number one struggle, like you said, with the even Pope and Young. Look how many people bow hunt and are involved, but I don't know what the secret is to getting people to care. I mean, I realize that in coaching, like, you can't really teach passion to people. It has to be something that comes from within yourself. So it's a struggle. It's a struggle to keep people involved, and also within these organizations to keep it from being just a handful of people that do all of the work, and it's hard. It really is a struggle to keep it going.
Well, I want to ask you about one more issue, and then I want to kind of transition to maybe a little bit more fun of your personal bow hunting, adventures and things like that. But I do have to bring this up, and a part of me is just curious to have a little conversation with you, because it's an issue that comes up constantly in the bow hunting world today, and that's crossbows. And the reason I want to talk about it is I don't know anything about Maryland's background with crossbows, although I'm like 99.9% sure it's a crossbow state today. You can use them if you want to. I know in Pennsylvania, it was a big fight for a long time. And I know that our state bow hunting organization was really against them during that whole period where our state game commission was thinking about legalizing them. And I think 2008 was the year that they came on full time. And the reason that I bring it up is this: it's really interesting. And again, I don't know how Maryland compares, but it was very, very much in the news about 3 or 4 weeks ago here, Maribeth. For the very first time in Pennsylvania history this past year, there were more bucks harvested with archery than there were with firearms. And that had never happened. And it wasn't a lot more. And if you really dove into the data, you realize that it was really concentrated like in the Southeast around Philadelphia and the Southwest around Pittsburgh. And if you went to the more rural areas, there were still a lot more bucks being taken with firearms. But again, just taking a statewide harvest total, for the first time ever, more archery bucks than firearm bucks. And then when you looked into the data, 67% of those archery bucks were crossbow bucks. And that's also participation. We've seen that for a couple years now, where it looks like the crossbow has kind of, I don't know if it's leveling off, but I think it sort of is in a way. I mean, it's not rocketing up anymore. I think we've kind of reached this point where it's roughly 70% of all the archery participants, and 70% of the archery harvest is now crossbow. And this is a big deal to me as the editor of a bow hunting magazine, because Pennsylvania is not unique. Now, the percentages aren't going to be exactly the same, but if you go to Ohio, it's very similar. If you go to Illinois now, it's getting to be very similar. You go to Wisconsin, it's getting to be very similar. All these states that are big historical bow hunting states in terms of the numbers of bow hunters, that marketplace is changing. The face of the sport is changing. And I realize that there are still a lot of people who are like, it's not even bow hunting, and yet the states are saying it's archery. And then there's like us, who's like, who do we serve audience wise? It's very interesting. There's so many facets, and I'm going to stop talking now because I just want to hear about the history in Maryland, your society's history. And as you like look out to the future and you realize, like, kind of almost separate and apart from your personal opinion, and you're free to share that as well, but like, as you try to get more people into bow hunting, would you not want to maybe recruit somebody who's, yeah, I know you have a crossbow. I know you've been hunting with the crossbow, but if you ever tried, shooting vertical archery, have you ever tried a recurve? Have you ever tried a compound? And maybe there room for all of us. And with that, I throw it to you.
Wow. Yeah, that was, you unpacked a lot in there with that. And it was a hot topic for Maryland Bowhunters Society when that became an option in Maryland. They were pushing to go ahead and open it up for everyone, because before that it was, if you had a disability, a doctor's order, you were able to use a crossbow. When we opposed it, but it's hard because, like you said, on one hand, you try to keep your own personal feelings out of it. We want to see more people in the woods. That's something that we're all striving for. And this is a way to get people out there doing it. In a state like ours, where we have people, crying that we have too many deer, it's so important that everyone has that opportunity. And, part of me is happy to see the numbers going up of bow hunters, because, how much more of a season do we get? How many more opportunities do we get as bow hunters? Like, it's great. And like you said, but do we have room for us all? Because the problem is more and more people are crowding into these spaces. Maryland is a small state. And although we do have a good amount of public land, you see all the time these new, housing developments and solar panels and all these things going up. I'm with you. I think I have noticed that things have sort of leveled off. And it's like, is it a loss? Could you think back to the guys who did oppose it so early on, and it caused a big ruffle within Maryland Bowhunters Society. It actually caused a huge division of people. And again, membership dropped because they were like, well, we like crossbows, and we were over here saying that we don't support this. So one thing we try to do whenever we have an issue coming up is we try to poll our members so that we can claim, hey, the majority of our members do support this or that. And again, like I said, there's so much division and disparity within hunting, because gun hunters sometimes don't like bow hunters. And then you've got within the bow hunting, you have the crossbow, the recurves.
Well, the thing that I find, and I do think this is fair to say, I would say that there are probably more vertical bow hunters that have a problem with a crossbow hunter than have a problem with a rifle hunter. I would say there's probably more vertical bow hunters get agitated about the crossbow than they do about the rifle. And I think the big reason for that is because we're sharing a season, whereas the firearms season is separate. And so then,
and a part of it does feel unfair. As someone who, I don't shoot outside of 20 yards. I like giving it.
I don't want to interrupt, but are you strictly traditional now in your bow hunting?
Yeah, I haven't shot a compound bow in years now. Probably don't even have the muscle memory to do it anymore.
And are you a recurve or a longbow person?
A recurve. I shoot a blacktail recurve, and since 2018, I have been strictly traditional hunting. So yeah, part of me is like, well, that's not fair. You shot that deer at 100 yards. Did it really give them a fair chance? Is it really bow hunting? You can't help it. Like your gut almost hates to say it, because again, I want to create this front of that we are unified as hunters in general, but you can't help but have that little feeling inside. And I mean, it's just part of growing up and changing with the times. It's like you got to let it go at some point. And that's really what MBS, Maryland Bowhunters Society, had to do. It's just kind of like, all right, well, let's change with the times and evolve with the times. So we share, if we're going to share posts of people's, success, we'll share a crossbow one just as much as we will any other bow. So we're just trying to bridge that gap and make it.
So you're saying that MBS does not have like an official no crossbow policy at this point, even though historically you didn't necessarily support their inclusion. And I don't know how long they've been in your seasons there in Maryland, but now that they've been in for a while, you're kind of like, you've just kind of let that go and you're welcome. If somebody hunts with a crossbow, they can join the society.
Absolutely. Even if they just enjoy shooting a bow, or even if they just like the idea of bow hunting, you can join the Bowhunters Society. We don't have any strict rules of you have to have this many harvest or anything like that to be able to join. We truly want anyone who enjoys the outdoors, because we even have wives who will join. Every year we have our only fundraising event of the year, which is a banquet, and more and more wives are coming out. We're having to have more and more gifts and prizes for the wives and the kids now, which is great. That's exactly what we want. We want to expand that. So anyone who shows an interest, we are happy to assist, guide in any way we can. Now, me personally, I don't feel that comfortable with crossbows. They scare me. Actually, someone today asked me if I could help them shoot their crossbow. And I was like, I don't, it's just, for me, it's not my forte.
There's a lot of, when they're cocked, there's a lot of energy stored up there, and you got to be careful, and you got to be really safe. This is what I would say, because you touched on it. And by the way, I appreciate, can I just say, and I hope all the listeners do too, sometimes I feel like as the bow hunting community, we're afraid to even talk about this. It's like a taboo. Listen, folks, it's reality. It's 2025. And you notice I haven't shared any of my personal opinion, and I'm not going to. I just present facts. I'm the editor of Bowhunter Magazine. I'm here not to tell anybody what they should think. I think one of the greatest things about hunting, and this is where I'm going, Maribeth, because you touched on it, you love shooting your recurve. And I would stand up and fight against anybody who would say, I don't think Maribeth should be able to shoot with her recurve. It's hard to be proficient with one of those things. She might wound a deer. I think she should have to only shoot with a compound. I'd be like, why? She loves that. And that's one of the greatest things about hunting is we choose our own path in this. And it's what you're passionate about and what you enjoy. And you know what? It's not the same as shooting a crossbow. I guarantee you it ain't the same. Maribeth is personally choosing to handicap herself beyond what the state regulations do. That's her choice, and she values that. Now, somebody else who picks up a crossbow, because this is what I hear from people all the time. They're like, well, it's not the same. I'm like, well, of course it's not the same. Who said it's the same? It's not. I'm not trying to tell you it's the same. They're like, well, you don't have to draw it in the presence of the animal. Well, duh. I get that. Nobody's saying you do. There are a number of advantages that a crossbow gives you. Who's denying that? But what it really comes down to is, Maribeth, does the Maryland Bowhunters Society set the seasons and bag limits and weapons regulations? No, right? I mean, I'll answer the question. No. And as a matter of fact, if you did, crossbows wouldn't even be included, right? Because you already told me that you had opposed it at that time. Well, guess who else doesn't? Bowhunter Magazine doesn't set this either. Nobody can. But here as we sit in 2025, we already talked about some of the statistics. There's so many people out there doing that. Do you want to continue to be at a never-ending enmity with those people, right? A never-ending argument, a fight? Or are we at the point now where we need to say, hey, I mean, I appreciate the fact that you're interested in being out here and experiencing this and doing this. And if you think that's good, maybe try this, because now you're going to see what Maribeth sees with her recurve. If you give this a try, you're going to realize, wow, this adds even another layer of challenge. Now, you're not going to convert everybody, but you're going to convert some. Yeah. And if you just tell people they all suck, you're going to convert none with that. Have you ever walked up to somebody and told them they sucked and then had them decide that they thought you were their favorite person? Yeah, because your odds of that are zero, right?
Exactly. You get more bees with honey, right? Isn't that the words? But there's so many people that may otherwise never have been able to experience the outdoors if they weren't able to take a crossbow. Maryland has a program called it's a mentorship program for shot mentored hunt, and DNR and Blackwater Refuge have come together to put this program on. And I was mentoring the first year, and the property I was going to was bow only. And here I've got a first time person who's never hunted. And I'm like, we got to figure out how we can get them to use a bow. Well, there was not going to be an opportunity for her to shoot a compound or a recurve well enough to be able to take that hunting. So we did opt for a crossbow. And you know what? She got her first deer with that crossbow, and it would have never been possible if I'd have been an elitist and said, well, we won't do it unless we can use this weapon or that weapon. I just think that, it just makes me so happy to see these young kids too. People are able to start bow hunting much younger. And I feel like that spurs that fire, that lifelong drive. Now for most of us, maybe not most of us, but for a lot of us, it's a natural progression to want to keep challenging yourself as a hunter. And so by somebody coming out and starting with a crossbow, like you said, that doesn't mean they're going to stay with a crossbow forever. It'd be really nice for them to have somebody in their life that can show them the ways of shooting other weapons, and they might go that direction, but they may not be proficient enough to do that, to ever hunt with anything other than a crossbow. And if that is the case, then I'm just glad they're out there hunting. And I wish more.
And the thing is, and this is what I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, it doesn't matter if you love crossbows or you hate them. And again, I'm not talking about my personal opinion. I think if you love them or you hate them, you're right. I mean, your opinion is your opinion, and it's valid. But my point is just, you're not going to take all the crossbow states now and get them to get rid of the crossbows. So they're not going away. And we just have to accept that they're not. Now, if that's the case, and you think that more people should be putting down their crossbows and picking up a compound bow or a recurve bow or a longbow, then I would simply say to us collectively as an archery community, if that's not happening today, if we're seeing that almost 70% of archery participants have shifted or are now using crossbows, and we want to get more of those people using vertical bows, then how do we do that? We've got to come up with the right message. We've got to market it. We've got to present it in such a way that it's going to be attractive to those people. And again, you said it. 100% of people are never going to put down crossbows and come over to vertical. There's always going to be some people shooting them. And to your point, with kids, this is the thing I've seen, even with a lot of my good friends who are, quote, not crossbow people, but they are getting them for their kids, right? And they're getting their kids into hunting with them. It's a great gateway for that. It's a great thing for the older people. And then, like you said, it is still, for us middle-aged folks who are able-bodied, there's still a lot of good-natured ribbing. If you and if I'm out with my compound and you're out with your recurve, and then one of our other friends shows up with a crossbow, maybe we give that guy a little bit of a hard time, right? But it doesn't mean that we actually don't like him. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that we ostracize him. We're just kind of saying, hey, look, why don't you step it up? And that's maybe a little bit of positive peer pressure as opposed to the negative where we're just being like, oh, it's I won't even be associated with you kind of thing,
It's horrible to hop on any hunting thread on Facebook or anywhere right now and see the comment section, because no matter what the weapon is or what the animal looks like or anything, there's always going to be haters out there, the keyboard cowboys. And I hate that. I really do. I just hate seeing we're already such a tiny population of people. I wish that we could all just get along better and fight for the same things. That's just so important for all of us to realize that like we are a small community of people, and we really do need to support each other. You can mess with people a little bit, you can, And, but show them by example. That's one thing. I've had so many people reach out to me after watching my journey into traditional archery that were like, I want to try it. I want to do it. And my advice is always like, just start shooting. Just find what works for you. Don't overwhelm yourself with a million different options. Do what's natural, find it, and start honing those skills. And they're out there shooting with their families now. And some of them have gone on and started hunting traditional. And I think just leading by example. So those people that you see that you may think they should be shooting a different weapon, just show them the beautiful side of what you're doing. And that speaks more than bullying people or
You're inspiring people by positively and passionately expressing your enthusiasm and appreciation for what you're doing. And that kind of, I think, is a great transition to, like I said, to, the last part of our discussion, which is your personal experience as a traditional bow hunter. And it would tie right into probably some of the things that you would tell somebody if you were trying, whether they're a crossbow shooter or a compound shooter, if you're trying to convince somebody, or a rifle hunter for that matter, to pick up a traditional bow and try it, like, what do you appreciate the most about that? And what have you learned? What has made you a better bow hunter by using that traditional gear? And I'm sure there's so many ways, because you have to get so close. And so it forces you to be so much more dialed in everything that you do in the field.
Yeah. The traditional world has it's been fascinating to become a part of. I ended up with a really good mentor. His name is Bob Bartoszewski, and he's the one who really got me into this world. And through him, I was able to understand more of the history of traditional archery, and especially in Maryland. Like, going back, our first archery only season was 1951, and a gentleman by the name of Rob Davis, him and another guy, Maurice Bradford, both claimed that they shot the first bucks in Maryland during that season. I don't know. They're both have passed on, so they can't. They're probably fighting about it still to this day on the other side. But, Mr. Rob Davis went door to door and made petitions to be able to make that archery only season happen. So there's a lot of history and passionate people that came from this traditional world. And again, those people that were so strictly traditional, it was very hard for them to see the compound era happen. And then to see the crossbow era happen was even tougher for them. But for me, when I first got that recurve in my hand, and, I was thinking the other day, actually, the first time I shot a compound, I went to the local sporting goods store and I made sure everything's safe. And I just went and shot. And the guy was like, what were you aiming at? And I was like, I wasn't aiming. I wanted to see how it felt. That should have been my clue right there, that probably I was an instinctive traditional shooter right from the start. And that's what it was. When I first, I asked Bob, I said, how am I supposed to aim this thing? And he said, how do you throw a softball? I was a college softball player, so that hit home for me. I'm like, well, you don't, you just do it. And it was just the most natural thing that I've ever done. But it took me years to really get that muscle memory up. It wasn't something that I tell people, don't take it lightly. Don't just run out there because you shoot a good round and think it's going to happen, because it is very difficult. There's many different ways to do it, and honing your skills and finding your way of doing it is really important before going out there and encountering an animal. So I had started shooting for a couple years, and then in 2018, I was like, I'm done. I'm ready to go ahead and make that full switch, because before that, I was going back and forth, not very successfully, because I remember distinctly night hunting in Texas one time for pigs. And me and my brother had hunted all night up in this double ladder stand. It was terrible. I slept on and off, and a group of pigs came in, and I get the shot. And I missed. And he's like, which one were you aiming at? And I was like, I wasn't aiming. I was just shooting. And that's when I realized, hey, I got to make this switch and go and follow through with it. And that's exactly what I did. And my first season, early on, I had 2 chances at 2 absolutely beautiful bucks, like unreal. It was almost not fair that this first season of me trying these extra challenges that I would encounter probably the biggest deer of my bow hunting life. But I did, and messed up both of those opportunities. And by the end of the season, I had kind of been like, you know what, I'm just going to take a doe and go ahead and be happy about that and just get this first kill under my belt. And a beautiful buck by the name of No Brows came out, and he was my first ever traditional archery harvest. And actually I wrote a story about him in Bowhunter magazine, and I have that on my wall to this day. So my journey then took off from there. And what made me proficient though was shooting a lot. And it was fun. Like I have 2 9-year-old nephews, nieces, you know, all these little babies running around, and I take them outside and we shoot leaves, we shoot pine cones, we'll shoot balloons, we'll do anything. And that practice has made a world of difference when it came to my hunting. So definitely I have learned to be way sneakier. I have your scent, even where you walk, even your ground scent plays a part in it when you're trying to get an animal that close. I always feel like I am successful, even if I'm not taking a shot, if I can have a deer standing right underneath my stand, just about close enough that I could drop something on their head. That's when I know that I have done my job. And I think a big part of it that appealed to me too was, you know, as an animal lover and a hunter who likes challenging myself, I wanted to give that animal a fair chance. I want them to be able to use their sense of smell, their eyesight, their ears, because nothing worse than a rustly coat when you're trying to pull your bow back and a deer is 10 yards from you. It's not going to happen. Everything you do, every movement you make makes such a difference. It made me completely change the way I set up my stands. And Bob was a big part of that in helping me to build more cover, create nest, picking my trees and my locations a lot differently. That challenge made me have to re-question everything that I thought I already knew about bow hunting. And that is one of the most exciting things as a person who's hunted for a long time, to be able to feel the fire again of something new. I think that all of us are always seeking that. And you get it when you take a kid hunting or even shooting. And for you to create a new challenge and a new way of life, it is like, it just reinvigorates you and relights the fire.
Wow. That was a great speech, Maribeth. I mean, look, this girl is the real deal. And again, you can just hear the passion as you're talking about that. And again, you know, just to bring it all together, like that's where you draw people in, right? Like she didn't say anything about what was wrong with what anybody else does. She was just pouring out her heart and soul about like, I've become a better hunter. I've understood better, you know, what like these animals will and won't tolerate and how to get closer and have these intimate experiences, and also appreciate the law of intermittent rewards, which is one of like the great principles of like psychological training. You know, the fact that she blows opportunities, that it doesn't always work out, it makes that next success that much more rewarding for her. And so then it starts to become more about like the appreciation of the experience than just the carcass count and all this stuff that we as bow hunters know is what makes bow hunting so special. And she's a little bit further down that rabbit hole with her recurve than I am with my compound, that somebody else might be with a muzzle loader. And we just need to keep on sharing that passion and invite these people to come a little bit deeper in the rabbit hole with us. That's what's going to light up our future, Maribeth, for our sport, for the Maryland Bowhunters Society, you know, for conservation as a whole. It's going to be good for everybody if we could adopt, you know, that same passion that you have right there. We should all be evangelists like that, like Maribeth is.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, appreciate that. And I've always been a big advocate of that, of people presenting themselves in a way so that this way of life is enticing, not only to other hunters, but the non-hunters. You know, my social media is filled with horse people, with photographers, with family members that, you know, do not understand this way of life. And so I keep things real tasteful in order to let them see the beauty of what I see. Like I just shared my turkey season album, and I put a little disclaimer. All harvest pictures are at the end of the album. So all the people that like to see my bird pictures and my sunset pictures and stuff, they can go scroll on through without having to see something they don't want to see. So all of us, like you said, if we could just be able to articulate ourselves and represent ourselves in a way that shows why we do this, because we know it. All of us know why we do this. We know about the beauty and the magic behind it, but we have to be able to share that in order to bring more people in. Very true.
Well, you may have run unopposed, but I can see why you won that election for the MBS president, because you are a good spokesperson for your organization and your sport. And apparently a successful turkey hunter, because you mentioned harvest water. So you got your turkey in Maryland this year.
I did. I got 2 turkeys in Maryland, and this year, actually, my whole family was able to tag out, which is something that has not happened in many years. So it was my dad, my brother, my brother-in-law, and my nephew, Ashton, who is 9 years old. He took 2 turkeys as well. So every year we get the family together, even my other nieces and nephews that don't hunt yet. We get everyone together and we try to do a turkey picture and get the family together, and the kids love it. I have pictures of my nephew as an infant in my arms, and now here he is with his own turkey, in the picture. So it's been really cool. And now I did go to Texas and tried bow hunting them down there again. I go every year, but bow hunting turkeys, that's its own podcast. We don't have time to get into that, but it's a struggle, and that's a challenge to a whole nother level.
It is. And a lot of people who bow hunt them for a while decide they like just picking up the shotgun and shooting them in the face.
I agree.
Now, I will say, they've been around for a while, the different decapitator broadheads. Josh Bomar's got a new one out that he's had all over my social media feed this spring that I want to try. That's, I think, the way to bow hunt them the more and more. I've killed a bunch of birds with my bow, but I've shot a few that got away, and that's a problem with them because they just don't bleed. They're hard to track and they're good at hiding. And that head and neck shot deal is kind of an all or nothing proposition, and that's something that I want to get into. So, like you said, that's a whole
I had the exact same thought. It's got to be all or nothing, because I'm quite determined that there's more feathers than body in there. I don't know. Somehow you can shoot and look straight, and it's just nothing. It's just the air. Somehow you've hit.
It's a really small vital area. It can be hard to know exactly where to aim, and it's a bugaboo for archery turkey hunters. But like you said, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day, and maybe we'll have to, cover that sometime. But before I let you go, why don't you do this? Tell everybody where they can connect with the Maryland Bowhunters Society.
So you can find Maryland Bowhunters Society on Facebook at the Maryland Bowhunters Society. We are also have a website that gives a lot of details about us and our history and what we do. We're also very involved in research. That's another thing that's always important. I just want to make sure that I get our website absolutely correct. It's MarylandBowhuntersSociety.org is our website.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
Do I have to live in Maryland to join, or can I join from Pennsylvania?
No. Anyone can join. Absolutely. Anyone who is passionate about archery and supporting state organizations like this should definitely join. I believe we are the oldest and longest running statewide sportsman organization in Maryland. And we're really proud of that. But I also encourage everyone to check in your own areas, because there are other things like Traditional Bowhunters of Maryland. And then there's other organizations that would be within your state that are doing the same thing. And I guarantee they're out there struggling to find members and to find people that are willing to step up. And Again, as we grow older and we start to challenge ourselves more, I think that going in, understanding the political side of all of this, and that our hunting rights just don't happen by accident, that it really does take a concentrated effort to make these things happen. It's important, and we all have to kind of do our part, even if that's just supporting the organization itself.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm so impressed with Maribeth, folks. Those other bow hunter organizations can find their own members. I'm joining the Maryland Bowhunters Society, and I do hunt down there. So, I mean, I think that's legit. And folks, that's Maribeth Kulynycz from the Maryland Bowhunters Society. That was a great episode, Maribeth.
Thank you so much. It was so nice talking with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time, and wish you guys the best of continued success with everything. And you're on my rotating guest list now. I'm gonna have you back sometime.
Good. Yeah, no, this was great. And it's funny, I always, like, before a podcast, I'll be like nervous, and then it's so comfortable once you get in and you just start talking about what you love. It's like, this is nothing. Why are you ever nervous? This was wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for reaching out and making this happen.
You got it.
Thanks for downloading the Bowhunter Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Pick up the latest issue of Bowhunter Magazine on your local newsstand or connect with us online at bowhunter.com.